33, Matthew chapter 25. We're still talking a little bit about the end times with parables now, and of course, the final judgment. Dun dun dun. Just kidding. Okay, so here's the question of this chapter. How are we supposed to be ready for Jesus? And what does that look like? That's what this chapter is going to answer. Through the parables, of course, because that's what Jesus is teaching. And he's teaching about his return. And instead of giving timelines or signs, he's telling stories because stories connect us, right? And stories are meant to propel our faith, and stories shape our daily lives as we wait for him. We can all connect to stories. That's why I love that Jesus teaches in parables, because we all, I mean, who doesn't love a story? That's what Hollywood's all about, right? That's what books are all about. So we love stories. So chapter 25, we have the parable of the 10 virgins. Okay, so Matthew is, like I said, this last week, his final teachings, we got to pay attention to his last words before he gets arrested and crucified. And he is speaking, and this here, he's speaking privately to his disciples on the Mount of Olives, okay? And Jesus, like I said, he had shifted from when he's going to return to now how we should live. And we kind of talked about that yesterday. Until he does return. How do we live? How do we live in the chaos and the crazy and the, all of the things that's going to happen and still be faithful to him? And so the thing about it is, and this is what I said yesterday, our hope shapes our present faithfulness. We have a hope. We know what everybody else doesn't know. When I think about that, it makes me sad because so many people don't hold on to the hope of Jesus, right? They're so caught up in the chaos of it all that they can't see the hope that he's holding out in front of them, And so, anyways, something I'm going to think about a lot, I think, this week. So Jesus tells a story about the bridesmaids waiting for the groom and the bride, right? And they are prepared. Some are prepared, that is, and some are not prepared. I think I talked about this before, but I don't remember. So let me give you some cultural context, because I sort of love this, the way that the Jewish people back then, and I'm not sure if Orthodox Jews do it today, but the way they conducted weddings and stuff. Okay, so what would happen, they'd have their engagement party, and then the groom, and they're basically married. I remember I did talk about this with Mary and Joseph. So I'm going to remind y'all. So they have their engagement party. Everyone's celebrating. This is it's a big old party, right? And then it's like one day party though. The groom goes off and he can take technically a whole year, but it usually was about 3 months or so, 1 to 3 months, depending on the circumstances, of course. He would take 1 to 3 months to prepare the room, the place for his new bride, his bride to be, okay? And he would go and, whether that, what that entailed, if they were living in a tent, if they were living in a house, if they were living in his parents' house or on his parents' property, he'd prepare the home in some way, shape, or form. And so the bride would be waiting, and she would know, it's not like she couldn't see the groom. Of course she could see the groom, whenever, every once in a while, however they, depending on however they saw each other. And he would hint towards, I'm coming soon. And so then the bride would be waiting every day, every night, because they would come at night, or in the evening, or sometimes in the middle of the night, or early in the morning, just depending on the situation. And so finally, when the groom had the place ready, he would go and he would call to the bride outside of her home. And all the bridesmaids, and if people would know, right, kind of, sort of, maybe her mother knew, or maybe her sisters knew, or whatever, and they would all be waiting, and they'd be so excited, and they would veil her, and they would get her all ready, and they'd primp her all up, and it'd be so amazing. And then they would send her off to be with her groom. And everyone would celebrate, and they'd dance and parade and follow them to the house and sing and all that stuff, which that was probably a little embarrassing. But then he would take her into the place that he prepared for her. And so there's an expectancy, obviously, to the bride. And I just think it's just the most beautiful picture of what Jesus is doing. Oh, my light just turned off. I don't know why it got dark. So isn't that beautiful? It just totally thrills me. I just love the picture, the expectancy, the waiting, the excitement that the groom is coming to get me and to take me to the place that he's prepared for me. If you know scripture, we're going to talk about this throughout, and hopefully you'll remember this story, because we'll talk about it in Thessalonians and Revelations, and it's a picture of what we are even in these end times. We're waiting and we're expectant because the groom has prepared a place for us greater than we can ever imagine. Well, there will be no sorrow and there will be no tears. I just said sorrow like I'm Canadian. Sorrow. Okay. Anyways, so y'all, when these virgins, the 10 virgins, are waiting, and they have to be ready. It can't be like, it's not transferable. They've got to be waiting and ready and expectant of the groom, right? The bridegroom is coming. Come out to meet him. And there, some of them aren't, and the thing about it is, faith always endures when you're ready and you're waiting for Jesus. But that requires an ongoing relationship, right? It's not last minute. Imagine as a bride that you're, it's a lot. Think about, most of us, maybe not all of us, but many of us who've been married or married, even if you've had struggles in your marriage or divorce or whatever, and I will say, I think our society puts a little bit too much emphasis on the wedding and not as much emphasis on the marriage. But nonetheless, we imagine if we, as a bride, it was chaotic on one hand, but it was also exciting. And I was prepared. I was ready, ready or not, and pretty much. And it was this time of preparations for so many things, preparing where we're going to live, preparing what our jobs are going to be, preparing our life. And so if it's a last minute thing, for some people that might work, God bless it. But most of the time that's not going to work. So then we have the parable of the talents. And of course here we have the master who entrusts his servants with talents, money, resources. 2 of them invest and 1 hides it, buries it, right? And it's not about the amount, right? It's about the faithfulness. What do you do with what you've been given? Okay? What do you do with what you've been given? Each of us have been given very many different things. It's about calling. It's about what God entrusts you with, the gifts that he's given you. They're meant to be used for his glory, but if you just don't do anything with it, well, a lot of times fear is what leads us to inactivity, right? And so we have to trust God and remain faithful to him, trusting even though we're afraid. And so that's kind of the point of that one. And then finally we have the final judgment. And Jesus here describes the final judgment, and he's going to sit on his throne, and there's a dividing line, but it's not about, he expresses his love through his action. He says, whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. And I just love, I'm going to read this part because I just love it so much. The king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. This has been his plan from day one, from the moment Eve touched the apple in Genesis, the fruit. His plan was a plan of redemption. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. The righteous will answer him. The righteous here are not the good guys. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison? And the king will answer, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Oh, just kidding. The righteous here are good. I messed that up. But as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. It's really important how we live our life. It's really important to see people the way God sees people. It's really hard too. It's not easy. He's not calling us to something that's simple and easy and just comes naturally. It is supernatural to live this way. And it's not about our works, right? It's not, because, it's not about like doing prison ministry and feeding the hungry, and those are all really good things. It's our sincerity though, right? Because that's not going to earn us our salvation necessarily. Well, no, I'm sorry. That's not going to earn us our salvation. But it is part of holding hope out and saying, here, come and eat of what I have. Let me cover you with what I have. I've been saved. You can be saved too. Genuine faith. Out of genuine faith comes compassion and obedience. And we demonstrate this. We demonstrate the love of God by loving others. And I'm sorry I'm crying. It just totally convicts me and inspires me. Because these were Jesus' last words. And what's crazy it's not about when he's coming back. Right? It's not even it. How did you live? How did you love others? How did you show up and treat people? Were you compassionate and faithful to those who I've called you to? Did you use your gifts for my glory or for the applause of others? Because every single time you showed up for me, is what he's saying. Guys, every single time you show up here, you're showing up for him, to be with him. And it's exciting because you're waiting for him. Because we know the hope that we have in Jesus. And he entrusts us with this purpose of living for him. And our love grows through obedience and compassion, and that's how we live transformed lives, because it doesn't come naturally. It is more natural to fear. But God is calling us to be faithful. So are you living ready, or are you drifting? Are you using what God has given you? And are you inviting others and loving them intentionally? Are you living a life shaped by hope and faithfulness? We don't sit around and wait and twiddle our thumbs. We're faithful in the time that we have been given. And we look out at the world and offer them the drink, the living water, the bread of life, the freedom in Christ Jesus. It's worth everything.